Moving on now to our special focus on the buck stops here. Not much work may have happened in Parliament, but one bill that did go through both houses of Parliament is the new Companies Bill. Among its more contentious and hotly debated provisions is to make CSR, that's corporate social responsibility, and spending in CSR mandatory. That's right. Remember, if you're a company that has a net worth of 500 crore rupees or more, or a turnover of 1,000 crores or more, then 2% of your average net profits will have to be spent towards CSR or corporate social responsibility. This has triggered a big public debate. Can you actually make a corporate conscience something that's enforceable by law? And more to the point, should you? India doesn't do very well on the philanthropy index. Just look at this figure. It in fact ranks lower than Nepal and Bangladesh on the World Giving Index. According to the World Giving Index, India is at 133 among 150 countries when it comes to giving. Yet, should it be the government's business to enforce a sense of corporate social responsibility? That's our debate on the buck stops here tonight. We're joined by Sachin Pilot. He's, of course, the Minister for Corporate Affairs, and this bill was really, in a sense, his baby. From Bangalore, we're joined by Rohini Nilekani. She's not just an author and a writer, but she's also a very well-known philanthropist, one of the few that we have in India. We're also joined by Vikram Singh Mehta. He's presently the chairman of Brookings India, but he's also been the chairman of Shell Group of Companies in India. We're joined by well-known economist and writer Dr. Surjit Bhalla. And also joining us from Bangalore tonight is Mohandas Pai, who's presently the chairman of the Manipal Global Education Services Limited. Sachin Pilot, I'd like to start with you. You could take some credit for the fact that in a parliament session that seems to be going absolutely nowhere, you've managed to get a bill that is your baby through the Rajya Sabha as well. It's one of the few bills that's actually gone through both houses of Parliament. But this particular provision of in a sense, enforcing a corporate conscience is something that has raised the hackles of many industrialists, saying that giving by definition is a voluntary exercise, not one enforceable by law. Why did you decide to make this mandatory?
Two things, Barkha. First of all, it's not a new concept. I think in India, since we've got independence, there have been many corporate houses who have done seminal work in giving back to the community. There have been innumerable number of efforts that the companies have put forward in terms of CSR. It has never really been formalized. I think what we've done through this bill is give a structure and a format for companies to be able to tell not just the shareholders but the country at large about the good work that they're intending to do. This bill, when it was being put through Parliament, is not a bill that came about in 1 month or 6 months. This has been in the discussions for more than a decade. The concept of CSR was deliberated, debated, discussed with every single stakeholder, including the corporate sector, the government officials, the consumers, shareholders, public at large. And this has evolved over years of discussion. And I think the provisions in the Companies Bill, which has now got the consent of both upper house and the lower house, I think is a very positive one. And every single company that I've met in the last 9 months has always said that they are keen to do this. And in my view, this is not just money being spent, but this is actually an investment. A company is investing into the community so that they have what is now perceived to be a trust deficit between some communities in some regions and the big corporates. This is not mandatory for every struggling company which is making losses or still in the gestation period. This is for large companies that have the capacities to part with 2% of the money in any way they feel like. So you've left it. I, as Minister, have made sure that we keep a very open and transparent way of doing CSR. There is no Inspector Raj. We will not mandate things. We kept it very open. So this has to be a collective effort. I leave it to the consciousness of companies to comply with this so that people are able to have better facilities and people invest through their profits back into the community.
But before I take this to the others, Sachin, there has been the argument that in many ways this is the abdication of the state's own responsibility. For example, if you look at the kind of corporate taxes, and I'm just giving you a counter view, it has been argued that corporates pay as much as 27,000 crores in the form of education cesses. This is used to partially fund the 74,000 crore education budget. So in many ways, corporates would argue that in terms of the taxes that you levy on them, they are actually already contributing towards corporate social responsibility because of the high slab of taxes. And to that extent, this is the state, in a sense, abdicating its own responsibility, its own failure at social spending.
No, I think that's a very dramatic misrepresentation of the facts. first and foremost, the CSR is not a tax. This money does not come to the government of India or to any state government. It is the company's money, they've earned it, and we leave it to them to spend it in any way they form, through any platform, any NGO, any trust that they desire. So there's not a levy or a cess. There's not money that comes to the government. This is not what it is. This is basically the companies reinvesting their profits, a part of it, 2% of whatever they make over the last 3 years back into, they can choose education, skill development, healthcare, sanitation, environment, whatever they choose to do. All we are saying is, please spend the money, put it on the website so that the whole world knows the good work that you're doing. And to my mind, this is a tremendous platform for companies to generate goodwill in the hearts and minds of people where they're operating. If one is sponsorship, which is a commercial interest. This is really to endear themselves to the areas and the people that they're operating in.
All right, Mohandas Pai, would you support that? Because when you look at, the giving culture in India, it isn't a very deep-rooted one. Historically, of course, Indians as individuals have a long tradition of giving. We give to temples, we give to religious organizations, for example. But as corporates, private charity in India is just 0.4% of the GDP. Compare this with 2.2% of the GDP in the United States of America. Yet the question is, should it be enforceable? Should it be the government's business to tell corporates, this is the amount of profit you have to set aside for CSR?
Well, Barka, I would say that intellectually I disagree with the concept of government mandating it, but I think the debate has to go beyond that because it is a law today. I support what the minister said about responsibility of the corporate, but I would like to leave it to the corporate themselves to understand that corporate social responsibility is a sustainability initiative, and if they want a sustainable business, they do it. And I think we have practiced that at Infosys and many of the companies, and I support that. But when a mandate comes from the government, however soft it is, there is something behind that. There will be control behind that. Now we have a very good young minister, and he's very open and very liberal and very good. But there's no certainty the next minister will be as open and liberal and will come out with some other rules. But whatever it is, Barka, I support the sentiment that is an opportunity for corporate India to do something for society, because corporate India's behavior, barring a few, has been very bad. You've seen the mining companies, how they destroy the environment. You've seen how they've taken away large amount of money from the community without doing anything. You've seen many manufacturing companies that polluted the surroundings and ill-treated the people in the surrounding villages. So when we speak about an intellectual argument, we speak about good people, but we don't understand the majority of Indian industry does not see it this way. So if Parliament decided in wisdom and there's been consultation like the minister said, I guess we have to do this and maybe it will work out. Maybe we need new modes of development, new modes of being just. It should work out. But I would say one more thing, Barka.
Yes.
We need our promoters and so-called billionaires to spend out of their own personal money and demonstrate to society how committed they are. So having the company do it instead of themselves, when they are the major beneficiaries, I think, we need something more.
Dr. Surjit Bhalla, when Bill Gates and Warren Buffett arrived in India, only 2 Indians signed on to their Giving Pledge program. And I think Mohandas Pai makes this important point that that corporate owners and barons and businessmen and promoters need to start giving from their individual wealth. Yet we come back to the issue of a mandate from the government. Now, Sachin Pilot is clarifying again and again that the government is not going to penalize companies who don't do this. They're going to ask them for explanations, and the government is not telling companies how to spend their money. Do you think the spirit behind this bill is something you'd support?
No, I don't support the spirit behind the bill. I don't think it's a liberal bill. I am sorry to disagree with Mohandas. I respect Mr. Sachin Pilot, but this is a very illiberal bill. This is not an open bill. And let me just go through a few points as to what Sachin Pilot said so we can have a reasoned discussion on it. He said that part of the reason for the bill was that this will provide a structure and format for people to give, to spend for the poor, let's say. Now, do we need a structure and a format? Doesn't it already exist? He knows the example of Tata's, Mohandas, of Infosys, etc. Firms and individuals have given voluntarily. Second, you mentioned as to how far low we are on the giving index.
Yes.
Did you go ahead, or are the statistics in the World Giving Index incorporate, if you will, the kind of things that you mentioned, the education cess, etc., which is forcibly taken from the tax? It's an additional tax, if you will. Third, how is this not different from a tax? They are forced to spend it, so it is like a tax. All you're saying is, oh, the government is so inefficient in spending it, we'd rather you spend it, but we'll make sure you spend it. So I think there are several layers of complete irresponsibility in this bill. And you know, this stems from the Congress's, particularly the Congress's sort of mandate that they want to legislate everything. And that's the major reason to be opposed to this bill, is that, not that we can do anything about it, but just like since we are having the discussion, why do you want to mandate everything? As I've mentioned several times on this show, etc., pretty soon we'll have a law, we'll have a right to happiness. I think this is getting really absurd. One last point I want to do.
Okay.
And that is, why don't we have a compact between the citizens of the country and the UPA and any other government that follows the UPA? And that compact is as follows. If the government, on its stated goals, if 50% of the money that the government spends in social responsibility actually reaches the people, we will happily give 4%. Why doesn't the government clean up its own act? We will save a lot of money, the poor will get a lot of money, education will get a lot of money, healthcare will get a lot of